If you got your Bibles, we'll be in John 5. Yes. I couldn't remember if it was 5 or 6. 5, picking it up at 16. Going through 29. So I know what they say in my head, I just don't pay attention to the numbers. So anyway, so we're going to read the text. We'll put on a short little video, and then which will help us explain the text, okay? So John 5, picking it up at 16. I should also mention what has just happened before. If you remember from last week, there were these two sort of juxtaposed episodes. In the one, you had the royal official who travels a long distance to see Jesus. Hey, my son is dying. Can you please heal him? The royal official, he takes Jesus at his word when Jesus says, I'll heal your son. On the way back, he gets word that his son was healed at the exact hour Jesus said. The next one is the man who had been invalid for 38 years. Beside the pool, Jesus says, do you want to be well? He doesn't really answer. He just says, I can't because no one can shove me into the pool when the time is right. Jesus sidesteps the whole thing and says, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. So the man does, except he doesn't even take the time to find out who is Jesus. He doesn't even know his name, right? We find out later he gets tested by some synagogue officials. Jesus finds him in the crowd and says, you're well, don't sin anymore lest something worse happen. And then, anyone remember what he does? Right, he goes and he rats Jesus out to the authorities, okay? That's where we're picking up the story in 16. And Jesus told this man to pick up his mat and walk on the Sabbath. So 16, so because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jews persecuted him. Now, to get a feel for the Sabbath wasn't just a religious thing. Sabbath was an identity marker. All right, you had sort of the food law, circumcision, and Sabbath, and that was what made a Jew, right, in their minds. So for Jesus to do this on the Sabbath carried the same sort of emotional and societal weight as we would put on the flag or something like that, right? The red, white, and blue, food, circumcision, Sabbath. I mean, that's sort of the weight that it would feel. So, feel the immensity of what Jesus is doing here. So because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jews persecuted him. Jesus said to them, my Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working. For this reason, the Jews tried all the harder to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So he's a Sabbath breaker and he's a blasphemer. This dude's got to die. That's what they're thinking. Jesus gave them this answer. He said, I tell you the truth, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees the Father doing. Because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does. Yes, to your amazement, he will show him even greater things than these. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, even so the Son gives life to whom he is pleased to give it. So resurrection from the dead has been given to the Son. Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son. So you got resurrection and judgment. 23, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. He who doesn't honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. We're going to stop there for a minute, and if we could get the video rolling here in a sec. Right, so to set the scene, Jesus has just told him he's been the guy he's healed hasn't been able to walk or really move for like 38 years. Jesus heals him on the Sabbath, and the people begin to lose their minds, right? Jesus gives them this answer, I can only do what the Father is telling me I can do, right? And so we're going to play this, and if we can mute it and just play it in the background. So as you can see from this video, this man is, what is he doing? He's blacksmithing, right? He's forging, right? So his name is George. His name is George Potvin. And as we go, what I want you to keep in mind is try and think, what is he making? What's he getting at? What's he making? Okay. So again, his name is George Potvin. He lives way up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. As you can see, he's got about 1 million tools in his shop. His shop is also, he's about 5'3", so his shop is built for short folk. Yeah, so this video, it just kind of shows him going through, right? He's going to light the forge. You just heat up the metal, and then he's going to pound it into a shape, right? If you can't read that, his forge is called 10 Mile Creek Forge because he lives on 10 Mile Creek. Crazy thought. Now, it's really not a fair question to ask at this point. But that being said, anyone have any clue what he's making? Probably not, right? You haven't seen enough of the video, all right? Here's the thing, though. I know exactly what he's making, and not because I saw the video, okay? I know exactly what he is making and exactly what he is up to, and I know exactly what his shop looks like because I was there, okay? This is what he is making. It's called a heart hook. It's just a heart and a hook. I'll pass it around so you can take a look at it. But I had the chance to meet George and make that with him about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was on vacation, so George lives way up in the UP, so my dad and I took a day, drove about 400 miles, I think. You got to go across the bridge and then another 150 miles west to Escanaba. And I got to sit in his shop. And George, he's fun. So he's like 5'3", he's about 72, 73. He's got that thick Yooper accent. Anyone know what I'm talking? When I say Yooper, does anyone know what that means? We got a few. All right, Yoopers are the folks who live above the Mackinac Bridge in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Yoopers refer to us Lower Peninsula folks as trolls because we live under the bridge, right? And so George is a Yooper, and he's got that real thick Yooper accent where you sort of just talk with the tongue on the roof of your mouth the whole time, sort of that Minnesota, Canada accent. I think it's because it's so cold that your lips are always frozen and you can't talk any other way, right? And so I had the chance to go up, and I spent a day in George's shop with him making that heart hook and a whole bunch of other stuff. So for a day, I became George's apprentice, right? I became his apprentice. And though you don't know what he's making until someone tells you, I know because I made it first, right? Because I made it with him, because I was his apprentice, all right? Now I'll just let the video roll until it hits the 9-minute mark, and that can keep your attention. Back to the text, Jesus is using the same analogy, okay? This idea of, no, I can do this stuff on the Sabbath because I know what God's up to, because I'm his apprentice. Right? I'll read the text for you again. It says, Jesus gave them this answer. I tell you the truth, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees the Father doing. Because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. Right? It's the idea of apprenticeship. Just like many of you who are parents, you've probably had, or when you were children, if your dad was out in the garage, you probably followed him out there, right? And whatever your dad did, you wanted to do it. At least I did, right? And so if my dad he had a hammer in his hand and he was smacking a nail, I wanted to go smack a nail, right? When George is doing whatever he's doing, I was soaking up every word, right? Everything he said, I wanted to learn, right? Because he's the teacher and I'm trying to learn, right? Likewise, if I'm stereotyping, so if I'm wrong, just don't hurt me, all right? Right, many of you daughters probably followed your moms into the kitchen, right? Or if you're mothers, you had your daughters follow you into the kitchen, right? And they learned how to bake or cook or do all of those wonderful kitchen activities that I never learned because I was in the garage beating on a nail, annoying my dad, right? But imagine Jesus, right? Imagine the world that he lives in, right? He's taking this example of apprenticeship, and which Jesus went through, right? He's Joseph's son. He's the son of a carpenter, right? And so he grew up knowing what his dad, right, standing next to Joseph, right, with all of these tools that probably looked a whole lot like the tools that George produces, right? Doing exactly what his dad was doing, learning, right? It was the way the world worked. And so Jesus takes this example and he says, I can do these things because I'm doing exactly what the Father showed me. Not Joseph, but the capital F, Father, right? How much time we got left in this video so I can move on before I lose y'all? All right, I'm gonna pause it there because y'all are focusing on that, which is fine. Yeah, and so if we can go back to the text. If you want to see more of those videos, if you just YouTube 10 Mile Creek Forge, there's like 4 or 5 of them. But I bring that up to show you the apprenticeship analogy, right? That's what Jesus uses to say, no, I am equal with God, and I can work on the Sabbath because that's what God was doing. It's what God is doing, and that's what I am doing. God is bringing in a new creation. That's what I'm up to. So back in the text, I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing. Because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. And then 20, for the Father loves the Son and shows him everything he does. And yes, to your amazement, he will show him even greater things than these. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, which is a prerogative only God has, even so the Son gives life to whom he is pleased to give it. Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. He who doesn't honor the Son doesn't honor the Father who sent him. Again, this apprenticeship idea, right? If you pretend you're a mechanic or something like that, right? And you have a young son. As your son grows up, he's always out there in the garage with you, right? And so he's learning things. He by the time he's 7 or 8, he can crank a wrench. He knows what a ratchet is, all that stuff, right? By the time he's 10, he can probably master an oil change, right? So if you're a mechanic, you got a shop. By the time your son is 15, you can probably take a day off and hand over most of the daily basic activities to your son because he knows how to do them. He's been your apprentice. He's learned, right? And if someone were to come into your shop, right, and dishonor your son, that would be dishonoring you because you've entrusted your shop to your son because you know he's capable, right? That's the same idea, right? Jesus is saying, listen, I, God the Son, have learned under God the Father, right? And he has entrusted me with these things. Now, he hasn't been entrusted with an oil change. What has Jesus been entrusted with? Well, 2 things. Raising the dead to life, right? And judgment. Raising the dead and judgment. That is what the Father is up to, and that is what the Son is up to, right? Look at the text, 24. It says, I tell you the truth, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be condemned, for he has crossed over from death to life. Judgment is deferred, and there's a crossing over from death into life. I tell you the truth, a time is coming and has now come when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself. And he has given him authority to judge because he is the Son of Man. Check out Daniel 7, 13, 14 on your own time for that Son of Man reference. Pretty powerful. So if I can, there's a lot going on in this text. If I can sum it up, Jesus is saying, he's saying, I am in some way, shape, or form, I am the Son, right? I am the Son of the Father, and yet at the same time doing so, he's equating himself with God. He's saying, I am God become man, and I am doing what God is up to, right? God has become part of his own creation. And what is he up to? What's he doing? What is the mission that the Father has given the Son? Bringing the dead back to life, right? Judgment is not about killing the living. Judgment is about destroying death. Judgment is about bringing pain and destruction on pain and destruction. It is about eradicating death. Resurrection is all about bringing life out of death. And that is what the Son is up to. That is the mission of God. For those, I just love that it's right at the end of 24. It says, he has crossed over from death to life. That is what Jesus is all about, is crossing over from death to life, resurrection, bringing everything that is broken and under the reign of death, destroying death and bringing that back into the reign of life, the reign of God, the reign of Jesus, crossing over from death to life. 28, do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out. And those who have done good will rise to live, and those who have done evil will rise to be condemned. Which is a pretty... is that great against anybody? I'm just curious. Is that a little bit? Yeah. Right? It sounds off because... And yet, Jesus said it, so we have to do something with it. We can't just ignore it, right? But how often, right, our fundamental core belief, right, as Christians is that grace, right? That I've done nothing to somehow earn God's favor. I've done nothing to merit my salvation, right? And yet, Jesus seems to be saying, if you do good, you live. If you do bad, you die, or you're condemned. And so how do we reconcile these two ideas? James has a similar notion that faith without works is dead. Right? How do we reconcile these two things? The way we reconcile it is a way, perhaps. Let me give you an example. I can tell you that I believing. Your beliefs are proven by your actions. All right, that's the premise. Your beliefs are proven by your actions. I can tell you that I believe vegetables are good for me. If you were to look at my diet, you would say, no, you actually don't, because you just eat meat and sugar, right? If potatoes are a vegetable, then they count too, right? I believe veggies are good for me, but I really don't, because if I believed it, I would eat them. But I don't eat them, unless on that rare occasion where somehow I do believe it and I get a salad instead of a steak or something, but those are very rare, right? All sorts of things where I say I believe this, and yet my actions don't back that up. See, it's not as if somehow your salvation it's not a scale, right? It's not a scale. It's not as if your good works are in this, in this hand, and your bad works are over here, that at the end of days, God is going to somehow put these on a scale and weigh them out, right? And if your bad works outweigh your good works, sorry, you're condemned. And if your good outweigh your bad, that's not how it works. Good works don't exactly make up for bad works, nor do bad works negate good works. It's not a scale. The Bible pretty clearly teaches there ain't a thing you can do to somehow make up for wrongs done. And the Bible has a generally negative view of humanity's capacity for greatness. I should say that. Which isn't to say that the Bible doesn't cherish humanity, right? It just simply states humanity has been corrupted. And we are born better at doing wrong than we are doing right. We've all inherited this stain from Adam, and it just infects all of humanity, right? Avoid the scale mentality. All right, the best way I can think of this is that there is nothing on the earth in any way, shape, or form that merits my salvation apart from the grace and work of Jesus Christ. It is his death, it is his faithfulness, it is his righteousness that makes a way for me to be reunited with God, right? It's him. However, if I say that and nothing in my life reflects that, then I don't believe that, right? And so if you want to put your belief to the test, then you examine the actions, right? And so I think what Jesus is getting at here is those who are doing good works are rebelling against this human trend, and their good works is evidence of their faithfulness toward Jesus, their following of Jesus. It is evidence of their faith. It's not the works themselves. I don't even know if it's your faith itself. It's his faith, right? It is his faithfulness. It's his work that makes me anything special, right? He's the creator. I'm just dirt, right? I'm just a clay clod, right? That happened. He breathed life into me. And if that's confusing, it's because it's this tension we have to get right, and I don't claim to have it all right in my head, right? But in some way, shape, or form, all the glory, all the credit, all the honor goes to Jesus, right? But if a life has no evidence behind it to say that the faith is real, then I think you may find yourselves in the rise to be condemned category. Perhaps not you, but I'm just a generalized you. Does that make any sense at all? Or a little bit? Maybe not. All right. Ask me later, and I'll try and explain it more clearly, although you'll probably get the same twisting, turning response. But another way that James put it is to say that even the demons believe. And so if your faith is just a mental assent to this set of doctrinal beliefs, well, congratulations, you've risen to the level of a demon, right? They know the same truth about Jesus that you do, right? But faith is more than just believing, or believing is more than just assent to this set of beliefs. It is put into action, right? Your faith, if not put into action, means relatively little. James would say it means nothing, right? I think Jesus is getting at the same idea here, that faith and works don't have to be this binary category, but somehow they work together. And your works don't make up, they don't get you into heaven. What they do is prove your faith or exemplify your faith. In fact, no, your works are your your works are your faith, right? Faith is mental, and yet it is worked out, right? A faith that doesn't have any works behind it isn't a faith. It's just a set of arguments or something. I don't know how to make this make sense. I'm sorry. Okay, Jesus in the scale? All right. Fair enough. All this to say, that was a bit of a side note. The main point that Jesus is getting at is that he has been given the task of the Father, that the Father has handed over to him the task of bringing the dead to life, right? Judgment, the purpose of judgment is to destroy death. The purpose of judgment is to eradicate death, to eradicate destruction, to destroy that which destroys, right? And Jesus is all about destroying death and bringing life from the midst of that death, from crossing over from death into life. Let that sort of shape the way that you view the world, because that will impact every little bit of your life, all right? Crossing over from death into life. And so what might that mean on a real basic day-to-day, when you wake up tomorrow morning or this afternoon? How does that affect the way that you might do day-to-day life, okay? Whatever is broken, fix it. Whatever has fallen under the reign of death, bring it back to life. And so if you go home and you see that, well, this is going to happen for us soon because we got another one on the way. If your kids are just going at each other's throats, right, and they're fighting and they're tearing each other down, that belongs to the reign of death. I mean, all kids do it, but that's broken. That's not the way that God wired the world. And so do your best to try and rewire that, to try and bring that out of death and into life, right? There's every arena of your life, right? Think about your workplace. Are there habits or things that you do or that are just part of your workplace that are destructive? Then work to make those not destructive. Work to bring those out of the reign of death and into the reign of life, right? This is a pretty poignant one. We just had a massive election this week, did we not? Right? And if you've paid attention to the news, we are very divided, right? One commentator said that the narrower margin you win, the more division you have post-election, right? And so as a country, we are quite divided, and we have people all over the world, all over the country, taking to the streets, just irate, right, that their candidate lost and that the other candidate won, right? Division is not the way that God wired the world to work. And so whatever sphere of influence you have, if that division is present, doesn't mean you have to abandon one candidate for the other or anything like that, but work to foster unity rather than division. Work to foster peace and positive rather than strife and tearing down. Right, does that make sense? Right, whatever in your life is on a trajectory toward death, switch it. Jesus is all about bringing death and bringing it back to life. Okay? I think I'm running low on time here, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for bearing with my confusing jargon and such. Death to life, death to life. That's what Jesus is all about. That's what we as Jesus followers are all about. All right. Would you pray with me? And we'll close this out. Father God, thank you. Thank you for entrusting to Jesus this wonderful task of bringing death to life. And thank you for inviting us into that as your image bearers, as Jesus followers. And I pray that we would do that well, that we would be a people who calls out death and seeks to bring life from it. And I pray that where we see life, that we would seek to make it flourish. And then we just beg for your help and your wisdom to do that, and the courage to follow through on that. We love you, and in your precious name I pray. Amen.